Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesman Majed Al-Ansari says the ongoing ceasefire negotiations in the Gaza Strip are positive and productive, while declining to get into the details of the sensitive talks. Al-Ansari announced this at a weekly briefing on Tuesday, saying Hamas has accepted a draft agreement for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and the release of dozens of hostages. Two officials involved in the talk said Tuesday Hamas had also indicated in a statement that the ongoing negotiations had reached their final stage. The United States, Egypt, and Qatar have spent the past year trying to mediate an end to the 15-month war and secure the release of dozens of hostages captured in Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack that triggered it. Some 100 Israelis are still captive inside Gaza, and the military believes at least a third of them are dead.
What can be confirmed, of course, is that the drafts have been delivered to both parties. Yes, the obstacles to the main contentious issues between the two sides have been overcome. And yes, discussions are now underway regarding the final details. However, we cannot provide any details about the nature of these specifics or where these discussions stand today, except to say that we have moved past the major obstacles in the disagreements between the two parties. Meetings are currently ongoing here in Doha between the parties, or as you know, indirectly. But the meetings are now in session, and all parties are present in Doha, as in all previous rounds of negotiations. We are awaiting updates from their side as soon as possible. It is difficult for me, especially given past experiences that you are all aware of, to set any time frame for an announcement, except to say that today we are at the closest point to reaching an agreement, compared to previous attempts in past months.
Meanwhile, Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister says Israel is hoping for good news in the next few hours on a ceasefire deal with Hamas. Sharon Haskell said during a media briefing in Jerusalem that the talks are taking place with the delegations from all parties in Qatar.
Secretary Blinken has quite rightfully said in the recent hours, the ball is in Hamas's courts. We thank President Biden and President-elect Trump and their team for their immense effort to bring back our family members home. The negotiation teams are in Qatar, and we are hoping to reach a deal very soon. President-elect Trump gave to those parties was actually very important in pushing through that deal. And we're very thankful for President Biden and President-elect Trump for actually pushing these efforts. Iran attempted to lure an Israeli citizen to Dubai in order to harm him. Iran continues its terror activities against the State of Israel. We call on the international community to pressure Iran in order to counter the Iran's attack and aggression on the State of Israel and world order.
Marek Laskiewicz joins us now to discuss more on these stories. Glad to have you join us, Marek. What's your sense of where the deal is currently at?
I think there will be at least a phase one deal, and the reason is quite simple. It's President-elect Donald Trump. He is the extra ingredient because actually for months now they've been near a deal, on, off, on, off. And the reason why it hasn't worked before is for the same reason this deal is in 3 stages, is because it actually does not meet Israel's primary objective, nor in a sense Hamas's. So therefore it is virtually in many ways a status quo antebellum. In other words, simply back where we were.
All right, 42 days for the peace to hold. I mean, that's the first phase. And about 33 hostages that Israel says are alive at the moment. What's your sense? What do you make of the dynamics of both the Trump and the Biden camp working together?
It's not so much them working together. Biden has been hoping for a deal for months. And it's in part, and I was glad to see the Israeli spokesperson there mentioning this. It's thanks to him that the talks were, of course, set up. But it's thanks to this looming impact of President-elect Trump that they come to some sort of fruition. Incidentally, it's 60 Israeli hostages which they think are alive and about 33 dead, though these are, it must be a stated estimate by the Israeli military. And therefore, the phase one, where at least some hostages are released, is, of course, very welcome. But it is only phase one, and we've yet to see how it'll go ahead. The other aspect, of course, is it's almost certain nothing will happen until the inauguration of President Trump.
What does this mean for Biden? If it eventually comes.
Well, for Biden, it's actually a very similar situation to Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, who's, of course, was lying in state. The problem is that the fruits and the success will almost certainly be seen to be part of President Donald Trump, whereas a great deal of the groundwork has been done by President Biden. So it's a it's unfortunate. There are, of course, rumors that in the case of President Carter, the situation was set up a bit more. In this case, I don't think it's a question of a setup. It's a practicality from at least President Netanyahu's point of view. However, what is important here is that it's the LA fires and now a possibility of a ceasefire, which won't come during his time. It's a kind of disappointing end for him in that respect. But for President Donald Trump, it'd be very nice, a real gift that he's announced almost as soon as he's in office that he will that there was a ceasefire.
But of course, you can't take it away from Biden. They've been on this for a very long time and trying to finalize it. But Israel says it's in the hand of Hamas, that they have made all the necessary compromises. Hamas, on its part, says they're optimistic. The talk is in its final stages. What do you make of the speak from both sides?
Oh, well, both sides, as usual, of course, putting the onus on any delay or indeed any failure should it occur, though I hope this time it won't, that it's the other side's fault. So those statements are, in fact, quite standard. Far more interesting is the point of the threat by Israeli far-right, who will make up part of Netanyahu's cabinet, that they might resign. That is actually one of the key issues which is floating in the air all the time, like a sword of Damocles above Netanyahu's head.
Now you've mentioned that, this still has to go through the Israeli Military Council in Israel before it can be approved. And of course, what you talked about now comes to play.
Precisely. I would imagine a phase one ceasefire going ahead, if only because of President Trump becoming president. On the other hand, the phase two and phase three aspects of this are far more dubious, because one can imagine the far right agreeing to compromise just this time, but it's very hard to see them compromising later on, for the simple reason that their key target, the elimination of Hamas, has not been met. And that, as I said before, as far as they're concerned, it's a status quo ante bellum. Nothing has changed. And so I would imagine that there will be a phase one, but afterwards there will be intense negotiations, and it's very hard to see a phase two as we sit here now.
Do you think that there's any sort of pressure on the a sort of pressure being the reason for Netanyahu's soft peddling, especially from back home in Israel, not just the politics of it, the camps, but those whose families are involved?
Oh yes, there's been a great deal of pressure on him for now months to come to some sort of agreement. That's part of the pressures on him. There was pressure from the Americans as well to come to some sort of agreement. And the problem is that these pressures by themselves, while significant, were not the key to actually making a possible ceasefire now. It's simply the lack of predictability about President Donald Trump, his liking of a deal, and he's making it quite clear he wants a deal, which is the actual key factor, because the others you mentioned just now, they've been around for months without actually bringing about any ceasefire.
Well, but they've been talking, and this is just the culmination of the talk all the while. Kirby says there's optimism, but cautious, the phrase he uses is cautious optimism. What's your reading into that statement?
It's a very accurate statement, I have to say, because you see, talks before have broken down last moment. Seemingly minor issues have become major ones, and of course, the talks to break down. It's until it's signed, until it's an agreement, nothing can be said, and unfortunately, the sentence is all too accurate. But I think it's quite clear from what everybody's saying, there will be a phase one, probably after President Trump's inauguration. The reason for this, by the way, is not simply to give President Trump a present, although this might be an aspect of it, so to speak, currying favor. But the other one is, it's very important to know his formal opinion on this, because as president, he'll make a formal opinion. And I think that's the key reason why people are not yet ready to sign up until that aspect is perfectly clear. Because President Biden, however laudable all his efforts, is unfortunately soon off the stage.
What's the probability that this occurs before his exit?
I don't think that's likely, because certainly Netanyahu has to be certain of where the US stands. And the key person is President Donald Trump, currently elect. When he's president and speaks, that will be the voice of authority and not a promissory statement as he can issue now. I believe personally that everything will be hinging on the inauguration myself. Moreover, there are still many details to be resolved, as I understand it. These are not fundamental. They're quite right that they've made the basic concessions on both sides, but there still is some work to be done.
Interestingly, Marek, there's also the effect of humanitarian aid for the lots of people suffering in Gaza.
Yes, for Israel, this ceasefire has a huge benefit in that for at least some days and weeks, to be more accurate, aid in theory should flow without a problem, which takes the onus of them being accused of some sort of genocide and puts the onus on the aid agencies and on Gaza itself, the Arabs living there, to basically feed themselves. And this is actually, of course, a very good aspect of the ceasefire. It takes the heat off Israel. Of course, to be honest, the situation is by no means that simple, because there are actually military still be left in Gaza. There still will be controls. And on top of it all, it is the damage during the war which is the problem, which won't be solved. It will be alleviated, but it won't be solved by the aid. But however, it does mean any problems can be put on the aid agency and the Gazans, as it's now their problem, their responsibility.
All the world waits in bated breath. 15-month-old war, 45,000 plus, according to the health ministry in Gaza, dead Palestinians. One hopes that eventually this comes through. Thank you so much, Marek, for your time on The World.